Next is in terms of traveling. So obviously, speaking of we just discussed earlier. So traveling is a big key concern, and in particular, if you're from UK or in the United Kingdom and you plan to travel to and from United Kingdom, the government has seen to it that if you fail to divulge or inform that you have COVID-19 in your form, you can be jailed for as long as 10 years. Okay? Now, whether 10 years is a justifiable reason given the severity of, lying about, of having COVID-19 in terms of traveling to and from different locations here is justified. But I guess they're trying to make a strong, what do you call this? Strong point of to not take this lightly here. Now, whether they would have to change this or will this be implemented properly or not, there have been backlashes regarding the situation here. And according to the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps said that the British public would expect a pretty strong action. I like to think so, right? If it were in our country and they were to tell us that, let's say you did not truthfully tell of your whereabouts and whether you tested, whether you tested positive or negative and so forth, that you should be, jailed for 10 years and so forth. And according to a former Supreme Court judge, Lord Sumption, stated that the sex offenders have lower tariffs compared to the one we just discussed here. Now, we're not saying that, sex offenders and, being tested positive are at the same levels, but I think the Transport Secretary, Mr. Shapps, is trying to make a point here. But is it, valid in terms of the penalty that you're supposed to incur if you were to violate? You know, I tend not to agree. I think that's an over exaggeration of the Transport Secretary here. Anyway, let's take a look. So as mentioned here, now the concerns obviously stems from the existing vaccines that is being rolled out in the United Kingdom. But the problem here is there's maybe a new struggle to control the new virus variants that's identified recently around the world here. So obviously, if people are allowed to move in and out of the country, obviously it's not for leisure purposes, but let's say for work purposes, they have to travel from different countries. So meaning the country is always exposed, right? Either you shut down the traveling industry, you shut down your border so that you can limit the spread of the virus, but obviously business has to continue, right? And I guess governments have to find a way to balance the two here. But the question is, does it make sense penalizing people, right? And how are you going to check that if that person is telling a lie or not? And typically, by the time you check them, it's already after the fact. And let's say worst case, if the person did test positive and were able to pass through and lie about it in their documentation, it's too late by then. And I think it's more on the processes or the up to the government to ensure that before that person comes in the country or before leaves the country, they can ensure guarantee the safety, ensure that individual is safe to travel or come back, so that wherever they're going or they're coming back, they don't there's little to no chance of infecting other people here. And obviously, it's a very big concern here. And obviously, the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, who was interviewed in BBC Radio's 4, stated that the reality is that nobody would get such a sentence anyway. The courts are simply not going to impose it. If that's the case, then why even create such a law in the first place if it's not going to be implemented? It means that it's ludicrous, it doesn't make sense, it's just a waste of time, right? And resources to begin with. And take note, if you lie and cheat about your status, as mentioned, you can be fined as much as £10,000, right? So you have to go out of your way to lie and cheat the system. And by then, it's too late, right? Supposed to be you're penalizing them when you're caught, but how do you catch them before they spread or after they spread the virus? By then, it's too late, right? Anyway, so in this case, if you're going to falsify your travel history, by then it's too late, right? Even though it's a serious matter, I think no one is taking it for granted. But the point here is, you should limit who can travel, who cannot, and what locations they can travel from. If you know said locations have a high rate of cases, then maybe you should limit or stop or blacklist them for the meantime until such a time it's okay to go to those different cities or countries. And they call this the red list countries, right? And it mentions some of the countries from Portugal, Brazil, even South Africa here. And if you know those countries are notoriously have number of cases, then why not just limit or stop people from going there? So you don't have to worry whether people would lie about it or not. So even if you know a known country is have a low number of cases, but you still have to protect whether through testing. Is it rapid testing the best way, or unless we can find a technology, a better way of testing the individual to and from any point of location and get the immediate results that is accepted worldwide as a standard, measuring tool, it's going to take some time. And here's one of the examples here. How will quarantine England work for travelers from red list country here? So let's take a closer look here. Yeah, here you go. So you can see here, you get a negative test up to 72 hours before your flight. Now, getting a 72 hours of test, I don't know if that's an effective way, because meaning 3 days before the flight, you take the test. What if it's negative? But between the time you took the test to the time you get to the airport, what if you got infected along the way? 3 days is a too long of a time for getting tested, right? I think the best way here is to get tested on the airport itself before you actually you board the plane, and obviously the test result has to be immediate, similar to how taking a blood test here, but obviously it takes obviously longer than that. But 72 hours, there's a loophole there that people might still get infected, and there's a loophole for virus could spread. And here's the sad part. And then after that, let's assume that you tested negative, you must quarantine in a designated hotel for 10 days. So, I mean, if you're going to a particular place, spending there just only a few days, right, for work, right, you have to spend more than that. And who's going to shoulder the cost? Obviously, the people, right? The person who's traveling, right? And obviously, the government's not going to shoulder that. It's not just that the problem that you have to deal with. The quarantine arrangement must be made before you travel. So you have to consider that as well. And at the hotel, you must stay in your room. You have to isolate yourself. And then again, you must be tested on day 2 and 8. If you test positive, you have to stay longer anyway. And guess what? At the end, whether it's positive or negative, the 10-day quarantine bill will be 1,750 pounds per person. So assuming everything turns out well, I think they need to find a better way of addressing this situation, because it's not going to be for everyone here. And if I were in the situation, I'd rather not travel if it's possible. And according to the article here, as mentioned, the international travel is currently banned, which is good, right? But still, within the country or neighboring cities here, you need what they call this, permitted reasons to be able to travel. Not one of those lists is going on holidays here. And obviously, it's too soon for people to think of going on vacations in the very near future here, with the different holidays up around the corner here. Anyway, and obviously, one of the better ways, stated here, is speaking with other governments to have a standardized or international system that would be accepted and agreed upon by everyone here. So that whether to check the travelers, whether they're vaccinated is one, or if they're not vaccinated, the testing, I think the testing is key here. If they can agree on the standardized testing, let's say assign one for each country who is allowed to test, that would be considered acceptable with the result. Then if they can get it faster, like 1 day turnaround. So let's say you have to quarantine in the airport for at least 1 day. You get tested. Then the following day, if you get a negative, then you can travel. go to the point of the destination. Then when you get to another country or another location, you get tested again. So you quarantine there another day maybe, and then another the following day, and then if it's both negative, then you can go your own way, and then it's the same process when you're going back to your point of origin. And I think 2 days would be easier than considering 10 for one location, from one quarantine period to another that's already, more than a month of quarantine period. So obviously we still have to wait and see how fast can the turnaround time for the testing will be here, and has to be accurate. Obviously it's one thing to have rapid testing, but we want rapid testing but accurate results here as well. But obviously it's going to be a complicated matter here, and obviously this is going to be concerning who's going to foot the bill in terms of the cost and the consequences of doing several steps and processes here. And obviously tougher measures is important, but obviously the implementation is important, the cooperation from everyone, not just from the government, but from everyone, from all the citizens here. So from the airlines to the travel companies, they would be required to make travel sign up for the new measures here. Now, what if they don't follow, they break those, what do you call this, measures, but then it's too late if and when they have the virus themselves. So is it finding an effective tool? Maybe not here. But hopefully, and another concern that they mentioned here is, when you go to a hotel, they have different quarantine guidelines or rules here. So it makes it difficult. There's no standardized way. And, it's an ongoing process that hopefully, a solution can be found sooner rather than later here.